Welcome to this episode of CXO-Talk. I am Michael Krigsman, and I am here today with the ghost of Vala Afshar. Actually, Vala is not joining us today. He is traveling. He is presenting at a conference, I believe, on next generation customer service. But he's here in spirit, and I'm here in the flesh with Evangelos Simoudis, who is a venture capitalist and, like me, a member of the Enterprise Irregulars. Evangelos, how are you?
Fine. Good to see you again, Michael.
It's good to see you as well. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Likewise.
So, Evangelos, let's just dive right in. You are a venture capitalist, and I think for many of us, we hear about VCs and angels and internet and all of this stuff, but the role of the venture capitalist and the types of VCs out there are a little bit unclear. So why don't we start by your telling us a little bit about your job, and you are with Trident Capital. So tell us a little bit about the context of what you do and what your focus is and so forth.
Right. So let me start a little bit by telling you, first of all, how I got here, and then what I do on a daily basis. So I actually come from very technical education. I have an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering, and I have a PhD in computer science. So I started my career in the early 80s in a technical and engineering position with Digital Equipment Corporation. And then over the years, I moved to sales management, and general management roles. I did a couple of startups, and I also had an executive position at IBM where I was running their business intelligence solutions division. So after about doing this for close to 18 or so years, after selling the last company I was a CEO of, I moved to the investing side, initially with Apex Partners, which is a global private equity firm. At that time, that was also doing venture investments. And for the last 8 years, I've been with Trident Capital, which is a venture capital and growth equity firm here in Palo Alto, where I'm one of the senior partners. So on a daily basis, if you look at the job of the VC, what we do is we evaluate investment opportunities, and this means that we need to understand industry trends, we need to understand market dynamics, we need to understand associated company ecosystems, and try to determine whether one opportunity over another requires attention. Out of this, and again, to put it in a scale, Trident Capital, which manages about $2 billion, we look at about 1,000 opportunities per year. Now, out of these opportunities, we select very few and we invest in them. And over the course of a year, again, we invest in 5 to 6 companies, so not a lot.
So I don't mean to interrupt, but so you invest in 5 or 6 companies out of 1,000 that you look at.
Right. Now, some of the 1,000, I have to look at it. Some of the 1,000, we spend minutes on them, looking at them, either because they're inappropriate for our areas of focus, or they are inappropriate for consideration because they are either too late or too early, or they don't raise enough money for us to. They don't fit, in other words, in our investment profile. But so that may eliminate half of the plans, half of the opportunities that we look at. but we still spend quite a bit of time looking at several companies in more detail in order to arrive to the few that what we invest in. Now, when I say we invest in five to six, these tend to be the new investments that we do every year, and then every year we also invest to follow-on investments in existing portfolio companies. And this, in fact, brings me to the third thing that we do, which is really the bulk of our time spent in managing investments. So I have often said, I mean, I teach a course at Brandeis University. I give talks to both aspiring entrepreneurs and aspiring investors, and I say that the easy part of our job, if you can believe that, is to invest. The hard part of our job is taking that investment, staying with it for a number of years, because when we invest, we want to assume that we will be with a company from anywhere from 3 to 5, 6 years. So it's not a quick. Sometimes we have a quick turnaround, but many times we have to stay with the company for a while, and more importantly, during that time, during that tenure with the company, we have to work hard to enable the company to reach its full potential. That means we have to work very closely with the management team. We have to work very closely with the other investors and board members. You become, in a sense, an extension of that management team, and you better like one another, and you better want to work with one another, because it's hard work. And then if you do all that, the fourth part of our work is to drive exits, and that means that our own investors expect that our investments will provide them with strong financial returns, and therefore we need to make sure that either through an acquisition or an initial public offering, we provide those returns through the companies that we invest in.
And who are your investors? Where do you get the funds to place?
Yeah, so you asked a couple of minutes ago about the different kinds of VCs, and admittedly our sector, I don't know if I will call it industry, but our sector over the years has been specializing. So whereas in the early 90s, when I did my first company, my first startup, there were a few VCs. There were about 100 firms here around the U.S. They were investing across all sectors. They tended to manage relatively small funds, maybe a couple hundred million, 100 to 200 million per fund. Now we have a very elaborate specialization. We have angel investors, we have what are called super angels, micro VCs, early stage VCs, late stage VCs, private equity investors, and on and on. So there's a very very well organized system out there, and every class of investor has different criteria and different sources of raising money. So typically for Trident in particular, but also for the type of investor that we are, we tend to be a late stage venture and growth type of investor. Our sources of money come from state and corporate pension funds, from university endowments, and from family offices. We raise new funds approximately every 5 years, and these funds tend to have a 10-year life cycle, during which the first 5 years we invest the fund, and the next 5 years we tend to harvest, as we say, the fund.
Mm-hmm. I just want to remind everybody that you are watching CXO-Talk, and I'm here with Evangelos Simoudis, who is a enterprise venture capitalist. So please tweet us your questions, and Evangelos, using the hashtag CXOTalk. Evangelos, we actually have a question from Twitter, so very briefly, how do you determine which companies to look at in the first place? And maybe you can also talk about the investment areas that you focus on.
Yeah. So, the first filter is around, as you said, the areas that we focus on, which in our case, broadly, we invest in software, internet, and technology-enabled services. But more specifically, and where we have, I think we have excelled over the past 10, 12 years, is we have developed expertise in 4 areas, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. And so those tend to be the first filter. The second filter tends to be the stage of the company. So when we invest in a company, particularly these days, we would like it to have, let's call it a few million in revenue, 8 or so million in revenue, and we'd like it to have a clear path to profitability. So we do not really invest in a very early stage startup. So we used to do that in past years, but we no longer do that. Then as we move beyond that, we obviously like to have a particular ownership within this company, so a particular percent of this company through the investment that we make, because really it's through that ownership that we can then drive to specific returns, right? Once the company exits, either again through an IPO or a sale. So that tends to be our kind of like our first filter. If that filter, if a candidate investment passes that filter, then, as I mentioned earlier, we tend to we bring into focus our knowledge of certain markets, certain ecosystem dynamics, to determine whether the area that the candidate investment covers is one that we consider interesting enough or important enough. Sometimes we may have a competing investment or an investment in a company that is thinking of moving in that direction, and we don't invest in companies that are competing with one another.
So this actually raises a very interesting point, which is we hear a lot from startups these days, such as Workday, although I'm not sure whether you can call Workday a startup anymore now that they're not a startup in the traditional sense anyways, now that they're a public company. But you have companies like Workday, like Box, Host Analytics, Pivot Link, and there are many others as well who supply a piece of the enterprise, let's call it the enterprise software value chain, that especially for large companies, very often they're going to vendors like SAP and Oracle. And you hear folks from these companies like Aaron Levy, from the CEO of Box, has been very outspoken, saying that the old enterprise software model is dead because you've now got this smaller mosaic, shall we say, of companies that supply software for a particular process or part of the enterprise set of needs, and maybe they're linked together or integrated through what we might call cloud-to-cloud integration, which means there's no physical connections that's made. You don't have to bring in lots of programmers and so forth, and that enterprise software as we know it is over. So what do you think about this point of view?
Yeah. So as part of our work, both myself and my other partners who spend a lot of time with both corporate executives in companies that can be or are customers or partners to our portfolio companies. And we also spend a lot of time with IT vendors, both large, broad IT vendors like IBM, Oracle, SAP, as well as more specialized ones. And through these interactions, I would say that the first conclusion that we reach is that for the core enterprise systems, particularly the core transactional systems of the enterprise, IT is not going away. I mean, they will remain. IT will remain the guide, the maintainer of these systems. For the periphery, for the application layer, or for new applications, I think there is a great opportunity for change, as well as for in areas where brand new core systems need to be developed. And the best example that I can think of is what is now being called systems of engagement. Mm-hmm. The enterprise does not have incumbent vendors at the core that have systems of engagement. So I think there is opportunity for new companies to enter the enterprise and provide such systems. But again, what I think the enterprise has been doing, driven very much by the business units, and I think the business units are leading the way, whether it is marketing, which is a lot of the talk these days about the rising importance of the marketing organization. But I also think whether it is sales, whether it is the CFO's office, they're leading the way for innovation. And as part of that leadership, there's a new class of applications that is entering the enterprise by means of the business unit. These applications, first, they need to be integrated with the core systems, and I think you're finding now the purview of the core systems shrinking, right? They're shrinking to the essence of the enterprise. But then for all the new functionality and all the functionality that needs to be delivered more broadly, more efficiently, both cost efficiently and time efficiently, you have a new class of applications that are taking their place.
So you think that for smaller organizations, there's an opportunity for these startups to be disruptive against large established players?
Well, actually, this is a good point that you're bringing up. I think for smaller corporations, I think there is an opportunity for this new class of systems to become the core systems that will take them forward. I'm talking about the large enterprises. I mean, so when you talk about a J.C. Penney, when you talk about a Neiman Marcus on the retailing side, when you talk about a UPS or FedEx on the logistics, I mean, so companies that have been around and they have a long history of building and implementing these core systems. That's what I'm saying, that IT will not. These core systems will not be ripped apart and be replaced by the next new thing, even if the functionality, even if this new thing has that functionality. I think in these latter cases, you'll have the purview, maybe the scope of these core systems shrinking and being supplemented by the new applications, the new systems that are coming to market right now, primarily by private companies or by newly public companies. But then in smaller enterprises, where there isn't that legacy, you will be able to see these enterprises building their core systems based on this new technology.
Yeah, one of the reasons that it's difficult for a startup or any company to displace established vendors is because of the difficulty and the pain that's involved when you try to remove one system and then implement another. And I'm seeing startups being very focused on ease of implementation. And I'm wondering, within your portfolio companies, are you seeing that emphasis as well?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that both, I mean, what is making possible this accelerating adoption of new technologies by the enterprise in particular is first is the cost differentiation. So you mentioned host analytics earlier. So in the case of host analytics, one of their customers, Pitney Bowes, so host analytics is a SaaS application for corporate performance management. So their customer is the CFO and the finance organization. So they started replacing the on-premise solution, corporate performance management solution that had been provided by a large IT vendor with their application at the departmental level. They started with one department, and over time they extended that to 7 departments. And when we were talking to the CFOs of this department, by the way, departments, these were multi-billion-dollar departments. Those were not, tens of millions of dollars. But when we were talking to the departmental CFOs, we heard that it was a great ROI story, in that we heard that the solution was being provided at 10% of the cost of the corresponding on-premise solution. The solution was giving them, the host analytics solution was giving them innovation that they were crying for, and which the vendor that had been replaced had not provided in a long time. And then they were able to expand, to be onboarded and expand the use of the host analytics application within months, as opposed to the horror stories that many of us who have been in the enterprise for a long time have heard about the installation of systems. And the reason I mention this case is because this is a multi-billion-dollar company with complex and established business processes. So any new application that comes in has to abide and conform to those processes. And again, that goes to the prior point that I made, that many times is not easy to just rip and replace in a wholesale manner an existing application, because it's automating an important business process, and it's that is there for a reason. Now, when you talk about brand new processes, so social mobile and social are good examples of that. So corporations right now are establishing brand new processes about how to incorporate mobility into their everyday operations. In the process, they're designing, as I said, brand new business processes, the automation of which takes brand new solutions, and the adoption of those solutions is much easier. And in this way, new companies are able to penetrate the enterprise with this kind of solutions much easier than if they were to deal with one of the core, more legacy processes.
Well, I mean, clearly there is a changing set of expectations on the part of users in the enterprise, as well as on the part of IT. And we have a question from Twitter that begins to address this changing role of IT and the changing relationship of IT to the lines of business, which is, and the question from Twitter, and again, it's pound CXO-Talk if you have questions. So the question from Twitter is, can a cloud and SaaS-based startup level the playing field against larger enterprises? So maybe address that and tell us a little from your perspective, what is the evolution of IT right now and what's happening with IT?
Yeah. So I would say business units are taking more control in driving the enterprise IT agenda than ever before that I've seen in these 30 years or so that I've been dealing with the enterprise. I think what is driving this change is the fact that we are in a period of remarkable innovation that is coming from a number of different technologies that are hitting us simultaneously. And I don't think that the IT organizations, with their constrained budgets, with all the other initiatives that many times they have to deal with, they're able to keep up with that requirement for introducing the innovation at the business unit level. So again, I will go back to, and I think maybe a very good example of that is how online marketing has changed the world over the past few years. So in the past, the CMO of a large corporation will typically go to their advertising agency. They will give them a budget to do the marketing. The bulk of the budget may have gone to TV and maybe print media and radio, and that was pretty much it. Now the CMO has to deal with not only online in general, but they have to deal with the various channels within online. So your social channels are going to be very different from your mobile channels, from your email channels, and each of these, and to be effective in each of these channels, you don't only need to understand the dynamics of the channel, but you really need to have a very appreciative knowledge of the technology that goes into this channel. So the traditional just allocate everything to your ad agency and they'll take care of it, that approach is no longer working. So in marketing departments, for example, we're seeing the emergence of marketing IT. So these organizations now are starting to put together small technology groups that are taking care of their data needs. They're setting up their technology infrastructure, and they're able to collaborate both with corporate IT and maybe with the technology groups of the ad agencies in order to better serve the enterprise's marketing needs. So that is how, and I'm just mentioning the example of the marketing organization, but there are similar changes that are happening in other organizations within the corporation, within the enterprise. Maybe not as profound as what is happening in marketing, but they're still happening. So a startup, let's say a private company that has the appropriate solution that is clearly differentiated, I think can clearly inject itself in this new market. Let's stay with the example of marketing, in the new marketing technology ecosystem that is being developed, and assuming that they're solving the right pain point, they're providing a solution to the right pain point, I think they can successfully inject themselves in the enterprise.
There's another question from Twitter. Zachary Jeans asks, isn't Salesforce.com an example of this sort of enterprise business process disruption?
Yeah, I think, well, Salesforce has actually provided several innovations to an existing business process, which was contact management. I mean, if you think of where Salesforce started from, Salesforce automation, contact management, I think they provided innovation in both how that type of system is delivered and technologically delivered, right, over the cloud, and the business model through which it is delivered. And they, through that, I think they innovate, they disrupted and innovated that space. But I don't, at least when they were starting, they were not. They were taking an established process and moving it forward. It's not that they were creating something. They were changing the process, or they were automating a brand new process. I mean, Salesforce automation was there before they did, but they clearly understood the weaknesses of their major competitor at the time, and they obliterated them.
But don't you think, even though Salesforce, you raise a very interesting point, but even though Salesforce was taking an established process, contact management, Salesforce automation, and putting it on the web, there were such changes that came about as a result of that, of that translation of the process onto the web, that isn't it fair to call that a disruption? Or
absolutely, it was a disruption. I mean, they paved the way. I mean, as you mentioned before, SaaS applications is cloud-based applications. SaaS applications is one of the 4 areas that our firm is focusing on, and that wouldn't have existed until Salesforce showed the way. And I don't want to take anything away from them, and that was a tremendous innovation. I mean, before that, we were using the internet to deliver certain solutions. Some of you will remember ASPs and all that, but I think they showed it that it can be done at a different scale and with very different economics, and that was absolutely innovation. One of the things that, and I'm sorry that I'll make like a 30-second segue here, a lot of times when companies come to talk to us and they seek funding, they always try to showcase their technology innovation. And what I often say that in our business, technology innovation is important and maybe it's the heart of many things, but business model innovation is as important. And to me, if one of the several innovations that Salesforce provided was exactly that business model innovation. I mean, I don't want, we can talk about the merits or dismerits of cloud-based delivery and SaaS and cloud computing, but their business model innovation, which was enabled from by the technology innovation, was extremely important. And to that, they created an entire industry, and nobody can take that away from them.
So then, with Salesforce, especially at the beginning, you're saying it was the business model innovation and business model disruption that was the significant thing, rather than disrupting the established enterprise business processes that Salesforce automated.
Yes, even though in their case, in order to enable that business model, they had to create some pretty important technological innovations, including multi-tenancy and everything that the zero footprint client that enabled them to deliver what they were delivering as quickly and as easily as inexpensively as they did. And that couldn't have been done. I mean, that type of business model innovation couldn't have been done without the technology innovation that they offered at their infrastructure. My point, though, is that the business process they were automating, the innovation was not there, right? And because that was a well-understood, well-established business process.
So for people who are, we have a question from Twitter, and again, if you want to ask questions, it's pound CXO-Talk. There's a question: how do you recommend startups go about getting initial funding with limited capital? And I realize you don't fund these types of early stage startups, but having said that, can you give a little bit of advice to startups that are trying to go beyond, or who want to go beyond the technical innovation into the business model innovation side that you're saying is really all important ultimately?
So what is interesting, first of all, is to say that creating new technology, creating whether it is a new application, a new piece of software, and I always speak about software because that's my area of focus, has become, the cost of that has been reduced dramatically. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I did my last startup in the late 90s, to build the version 1 of the product was roughly $6-7 million. And now we can do the same thing with maybe $1 million, $1.5 million. Unfortunately, because of that, we are creating a lot of companies that show very little differentiation. So in any subspace that we invest in, before you know it, there might be 10, 15 competitors. So my first advice is try to find something that is a real pain. And that, I go back to this notion of customer centricity. I think it's very important. In today's enterprise is becoming maybe yet again customer centric, but I think this time it has the opportunity to be customer centric in a more serious way than ever before. Because again, the prerequisites from technologies to infrastructures to business models are there like they've never were before. So try to find a problem that your customers will really need to be addressed, and their customers will need to be addressed, right? Because it's all about delighting customers these days, and rightly so. The second thing is that don't worry only about the technology. You need to worry about how you're going to reach escape velocity from the beginning. I'm always amazed that companies will come to me and say, okay, I have a version 1 of my product, or I have maybe a prototype that is being used by a couple of customers. And you ask them, okay, well, how are you going to sell it? What is your route to market? How are you going to go get your next 10 customers? And how much is that going to cost you? And you'll be surprised at how many founding teams have not even thought of that, because we get so enamored by the creation of the technology as opposed to by the creation of the solution, and more importantly, by the dissemination of that solution at our target market, whether it is the enterprise, the global enterprise, whether it is the mid-upper enterprise, whether it is the SMB. I do not know, but that type of analysis, even to this day, with all this information that exists out there, you'll be surprised how few people, at least the ones that we get to see, have thought about that.
So the key advice that you would give to startups is focus beyond just the product and very seriously consider what is the direct and linear route to actually make money with your product.
That's right. And for the product itself, identify areas that are real pain points for the segment of the market that you want to go after. Because again, just implementing an interesting piece of technology is not going to get you the money, or at least it's not going to get you the money that is necessary to build and grow a big business.
Mm-hmm. So a couple of other points before we have to draw it to a close. This very interesting conversation. We were talking before about line of business use of technology in areas such as marketing, analytics, mobility, the accelerating move to put processes on the internet.
Yeah.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about what this means. I think we tend to think about the cloud as being an end in itself. But if we think about the cloud as being an enabler and taking a broader view of the internet, that seems to me very important going forward. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so back in the 2004, 2005 timeframe, we used to consider just application companies that were SaaS, that are cloud-based, as being the innovators, right? Because we were worried about how do I take either new or established business processes and move them to the cloud. We no longer, now we take, in everything that we consider investing in, we take the cloud as a de facto ingredient. So now we're looking at what else is coming together in order to address the problem. So again, when you look at it, we talked about the business units and their increasing power in setting the IT agenda. And again, for us is, I call it the appification of the new enterprise. We have a number of new applications coming forward, whether it is applications through mobile, run on mobile devices, whether it is applications that run on your desktop over a browser. So when you look at this, I think there are a number of technologies now that form the underlying foundation for providing new functionality. So there is, in addition to the cloud, you have a lot of these tend to be very data-driven. Analytics could or may not play a role. Maybe just the data that plays an important role. Social and mobile have to be taken into account almost from the beginning. Social, I don't mean how you put in a social network news stream, but even how you enable collaboration. I mean, this application, the host analytics application that I was talking about, what we've heard the CFOs talk about is how do I best collaborate with the rest of my department or maybe with some of my peers, and how does your application enable that type of collaboration and at what cost, right? And there again, the cloud and the social component become underlying infrastructure technologies to enable that collaboration, but you still need to build it. So we think that going forward, it will not be about just, okay, I have a SaaS application, but it's really what else are you bringing together? How do you worry about security, right? How do you make the chief information security officer of a large financial service institution or of an insurance company really fall in love with you, not only fall in love with your application, but really bring it into their enterprise and feel secure that the data that they will put in that application will not be compromised, or at least will not be compromised in any worse way than it would have been in an on-premise world, or that the decisioning will be happening as fast as it needs to be. You know, I used to say that back in the 90s when I was at IBM and running like the BI organization, the time to decision may have been, you know, a weekly basis. You know, somebody wants a financial report, right? We will run it through our warehouse, and every week you'll get your report. And now you look at some of the decisions that are being done for online advertising, right? Which ad to show to which user and how to price that ad in order to be attractive to the publisher around whose content you show that ad. And that's a 10 millisecond decision. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to be bringing these right technologies in the right context, as opposed to just saying, well, I have a cloud-based application.
So it's a little bit more sophisticated than just the kind of generic, well, we're moving to the cloud, because there's a whole set of other considerations that the enterprise needs to consider as part of the deployment of technology that's going to be meaningful and useful to the users.
Precisely.
So it's just about that time again. Unfortunately, I've really enjoyed this very interesting conversation. But you know, you and I are both members of what some people would say is an inscrutable group called the Enterprise Irregulars.
Right.
And we should just maybe say a couple of words about that, because I know people are interested. And there's a website that you can go to with incredible content called enterpriseirregulars.com. And the EI group, the Enterprise Irregulars, are, sometimes we say, it's a loose affiliation of enterprise bloggers, analysts, executives, investors, and others. And that's how you and I met. I think you've been a member for about 2 years or so now?
That's right. I've been a member for 2 years, and I have to say that when I was first invited to join, I didn't know what to expect. I knew some of the members, obviously, and that's why I think I was invited. But in the process, I have been absolutely amazed at the intellectual horsepower that this group of people brings together. And I have said this publicly, I've also said it privately to my partners, that it has allowed me, has provided me a clarity of thought through these very intense interactions, some of which are face-to-face, some of which, a lot of them over email and commentary on blogging, that ultimately I think is making me a better investor. I think it's providing me with a very important signal to the investment decisions that I need to make. So I feel very privileged, actually, to be part of it and learn something every day.
You know, I feel, it's funny you say that. I feel exactly the same way. I mean, I think describing it as being privileged to be part of it, the level of skill and experience and just raw brain power among some of the members in that group, I stand back just in awe watching the conversations. So this draws to the end of yet another episode, episode 6 of CXO-Talk, and I have been speaking with venture capitalist Evangelos Simoudis, and unfortunately, my good friend and co-host Vala Afshar is traveling. He's presenting at a conference this week, and so I give a virtual handshake to the ghost of Vala Afshar, who should be sitting to my left but is not here today. And Vala and I will be back here next week, same time, same place. And Evangelos, thank you so much for joining today. And everybody out there listening, thank you for watching, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks so much.